Hello, and welcome to the Silicon Valley Ice Skating Association podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to hear more of our content. Today, we have a really incredible guest, Sharon Cohen. Sharon founded figure skating in Harlem, as well as figure skating in Detroit. Now, with that, we'll jump right in.
Having me. I'm happy to be here. As a competitive figure skater from the age of about 8 to 16, I fell in love with the sport. No one in my family had ever skated before. It's something I kind of stumbled into.
Hmm.
But I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, which is a mecca for the best skating. So in the 70s and early 80s, that's where I trained. And at a certain point, I, of course, put my sights on college. And I went off and ended up at CBS News.
Hmm.
And I had actually heard about some ice hockey teams from Princeton and Yale that went to East Harlem to meet some girls.
Hmm.
And so I thought that just caught my attention because I knew, first of all, back then, 35 years ago, female hockey teams were still a little unusual
Yeah, fair.
back then. And also just there were no kids of color, there were so few kids of color
Hmm.
skating when I grew up, and it was very expensive. So I just made note and reached out to the uh, to the community leaders who were running it and
Hmm.
said I was a skater. And they said, well, we have some girls that don't want to play hockey. They want to figure skate.
Hmm.
So that was pretty much right out of college when I had come to New York City. And for
Hmm.
about 7 years, I started volunteering teaching, and I saw some pretty extraordinary things happen during that time, which led me to get together with some folks and start figure skating in Harlem. So my background is definitely not nonprofit. My background was actually filmmaking and journalism.
Hmm.
And I went to Brown, which was a wonderful education. But this is where I really found my home. So,
That's pretty incredible. So almost right out the gate, this was something that just sparked a passion in you. Um, can you talk about a little bit how it's evolved over the years? And I know that you guys have gotten some pretty cool recognition, I think, this past year. So maybe elaborate a bit on that as well.
well, we started out with really a group of girls at the basement of a church with some used skates and some community leaders that were like, here, why don't you skate? So we used to walk from 120th Street and 3rd Avenue all the way down to the north end of Central Park. And it was really about the joy of skating and seeing the girls get on the ice who had never skated before and really kind of just opening the gates of access and not knowing any different. I saw them evolve and have joy and accomplishment, and they fell and they got back up and they made friends. And I began to see that a community was forming around skating in Harlem. And that's when it became super exciting. We added more girls, and eventually this East Harlem program that I was volunteering at was closing. And the parents and I were it's like 6, 7 years into it. I was doing this as a side passion project. And we decided, well, let's start the first ice skating and education program for girls really in the world. And we made sure that education was at the center. That because, once you build this community around skating, there's all these great life lessons they learn, but really without a foundation of education, we knew that that's what would take kids to the next level so that they could make their own choices in life. So,
How much has the program changed? And it seems like education is like truly the center of everything. So can you speak to some of the, I guess, both milestones along the way and then sort of core competencies of today's program?
well, like I said, it went from sort of a volunteer group to an official nonprofit. We applied for 501(c)(3) in 1997. So
Wow.
there was about a group of 50 girls, and now we serve hundreds of girls year round. We have a summer camp, we have an after school program. And as you said, it's divided equally into skating um, advancement, skating lessons, and actual academic classes in STEM, financial literacy, communications. They have to keep their grades up. They aim for an A, but they have to be at least a B student to be in full standing in the program. And we provide college access support. So we start at age 6, go all the way up to 18. And even when they're in college, we're still in touch with, I think we have 1,500 plus alumni who are out in the world right now.
That's incredible. And what is that support system like when someone goes off to college? What does that involvement look like? Are they coaching? Are they mentoring? Is it just kind of staying in touch? Like, give us a little bit character there.
Well,
Yeah.
a lot of kids, obviously, we want the students who want to go to college to help them get to college. So that's important. But a lot of people don't realize that staying in college and graduating is really, the statistics dip after they get into college, they don't all graduate. So we want to be a resource. So we help in areas of financial aid, in terms of networking, in terms of early career development. It can be mentoring, internships, but we just make sure that we have an eye on the girls who graduate from our program.
So as I understand it, you guys have two kind of large milestones that have happened this year. One is, incredibly being featured by Disney Plus, and the other, I think, is around a facility. Can you talk a little bit maybe about if those
Mm.
are related or if, what that process has been like?
I thought you were going to say something else. We did have a Disney Plus docu-series that just aired maybe last month. It was
Mhm.
produced by Ron Howard and Brian Grazer and Robin Roberts. It's 5 full episodes. We took a group of students to South Africa, so they followed us there, and it's been really successful on Disney Plus. So we're proud of that because we
Love that.
just opened our doors and we said, please,
On it. Yeah.
document what you see. And our girls did a great job, and our team members really. So the other thing I thought you were going to say was we just won the Sports Business Journals award.
Yeah. Yeah.
SVISA award, which is one award they give out at the sort of the Oscars of sports business. So we're very proud of that.
That's
But we
amazing.
do have some bigger goals. One of the reasons we can't serve, thousands of girls a year is because we don't have enough ice time.
Mm-hmm.
Ice is a really tight commodity in New York City. There's one year-round indoor rink at Chelsea Piers. They have two surfaces, and that's it. In the outer boroughs, there's a couple dotted here and there, but most of the rinks are outdoors. So we've been in the good sense skating in the community at a place called Riverbank State Park, which is sort of just adjacent to Harlem. So it's easy to get to, but it's only ice starts to melt, in
Yeah, in the
end of March.
springtime you lose it. Exactly.
You lose it, and it doesn't get up until now November. Global warming has seriously had an impact. So it limits both the time of year, how much ice we get, but also the slice of ice time because we're competing with all these other groups, even though
Exactly.
we're paying the same as any hockey team, whatever.
Yeah.
So we believe that that with ice being a scarcity, that there deserves to be an ice rink year-round indoor in Harlem where we're the owners. And
Love
not
that.
only do we get more abundant ice time, but we will share that ice time with hockey. It doesn't matter if you're on the Upper East Side or the Lower East Side or the West Side. We would be a hub for all kinds of skating groups, but it would be owned and operated by figure skating in Harlem.
That's amazing. And I think a lot of what you're talking about sounds so familiar as far as, Bay Area also, it's so difficult to get ice time and any dedicated ice time for any particular group is yeah, it's really tricky because you're competing with hockey, you're competing with other programming and it's interesting. I think those two kind of New York slash Harlem and like Bay Area hubs have kind of some commonalities there. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, I think ice rinks are easier to build and maintain in the suburbs or even in rural areas.
Yes,
In
definitely.
cities, don't have a lot of ice rinks and really not a lot of sports activities for the youth who are all concentrated in cities. So it'd be a wonderful thing to be able to bring this, sense of flying across the ice and the discipline and the resilience and all the things that come with learning to skate and making it available to kids who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity. And that's really the crux of what we do.
Just having that access is so important to gaining those skills. And when time is so split, one thing we see in the Bay Area is, partially it really, you know, disallows a lot of people to gain those skills and have that access. And, one thing we talk about a lot in Silicon Valley ice skating is that not everyone plays ball sports and not everyone is really passionate about other sports. But with figure skating, it brings in some really, unique elements. And like you're saying earlier, when you fall, you got to get back up. And that, as almost like an entrepreneur, trait is something that you can
For
instill
sure.
in people, this grit. So I think that's just incredible that you guys are building something to really allow that access and allow those skills to be built.
Well, having a facility of your own, that's a big step, but
Yeah.
it is entrepreneurial. Skating takes initiative. It takes working with a group, but it also takes doing the work on your own. And you have to be sort of tenacious to get to the next level. You have to continue to kind of make mistake after mistake until you finally stand up. But it's all these built-in lessons of skating that have been so impactful for the girls in our program, many of whom are girls of color and would never have had access, as you said, to this
Yeah.
experience that builds character and that builds these skills.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, it's just it teaches so much. And now I did get a chance to watch a little bit of Harlem Ice, and so I had a couple questions. Um, so um, as far as that goes, can you talk about so one thing that I think was talked about in kind of the early parts of it was some of the figure skaters of color that have had impact on the skaters. I think Debbie Thomas was mentioned, Surya Bonali, Star Andrews. Can you talk about maybe how that's impacted the girls, and do you guys kind of incorporate mentorship from girls of color of
Yeah.
in those echelons? Yeah.
Well, you have to see it to be it. That's a common phrase. I would say that, I mean, Debbie Thomas was my time and Atoy Wilson was a little before me, Ty Babylonia, but they've all come to be with the girls and help the
Wow.
girls on the ice. And I think it makes all the difference. And as we've evolved over 30 years now, seeing Star Andrews,
Yeah.
all of this, there has been some evolution in the sport,
Mhm.
not huge, but there's been some evolution so that our girls really have role models. And, again, if they had the ice time and people don't realize in watching Harlem Ice, they're only skating 2 afternoons a week with group classes,
Wow. Yeah.
maybe a third. You can't, it's really hard to advance unless
Yeah.
that you're doing it every single day. So we're going to keep pushing for that facility.
I love it. That's incredible. Have there been any impacts, I guess, of um, being featured by Disney Plus? Like, has anything kind of come back to the group as a result of that coverage and awareness?
Well, I can tell you one of the best moments because they were with us for 6 months filming nonstop. So
Wow.
they
Yeah.
they filmed a lot of footage. I wish they had filmed more of the education, but I think it's less cinematic. But I will say that we had a big premiere at the Apollo Theater.
Mm.
We had
Mhm.
about 150 of our girls there, along with maybe 1,000 or so other spectators,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
an episode or two. And when they saw themselves the joy and the
Oh.
excitement and the bonding and the sisterhood, it was just so evident. There's pride, and there's pride in how our coaches, some of whom were alumni,
Mm.
how they conduct themselves with the students. There's a
Mhm.
ways, I think it's some of the best. You don't have to be an Olympic gold medalist to be a great teacher.
Mm.
And something is not necessarily the skill on the ice. It can be a lesson, a character lesson. And I think that really is what gets emphasized in this.
That's amazing. And I think too, one thing that's interesting is, you guys as well, I think had expanded to Detroit, I believe it was. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like? Because 0 to 1, in the Bay Area, we always have these entrepreneurial concepts that you go 0 to 1 and then 1 to N. And so it seems like there was some effort to go 1 to N. And yeah, just if you could share a bit about that.
I love that. I'd like to get some lessons from the progress you all make out there in Silicon Valley. It's extraordinary. Um, so we always knew having more ice time would allow not only for more students, but more depth on the
Mm.
ice. But
Mm.
there was really no way 20 years ago or even 10 years ago to make that happen. It's Manhattan is all buildings and it's not an easy task.
Yeah.
So we thought maybe we could see if our formula of skating education and leadership development for girls could work in another community
Mm.
outside of New York. So we did a whole strategic planning process. We looked at different cities like Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Detroit sort of had the best mix of ingredients
Mm.
for
Mhm.
success. So we went out there and ultimately they found a leader and a board. And I'm proud to
Mm.
say they've been in operation for 8 years. And just this
Wow.
last February, no, this last January, they have spun off and now they're their
Mm.
own independent organization, but they use the exact same model that we
Mm.
used. And it goes to show you that they did see say, the same types of results in not just confidence building, but a sense of pride and accomplishment and like you said, falling down and grit and getting back up and keeping their grades up. And we do a lot around career exploration as well. So it was great to see that it worked in another
That's
city that
amazing.
works. Yeah.
Is there any interest in expanding it further? Like, might we see figure skating in, Bay Area somewhere in the future?
Every time someone reaches out to us, what we did learn is everything's local. So if somebody wants to get this done, there has to be someone there in that locality, knowing that city or that town. They have to be committed to doing the work, because if it were easy, everybody would be doing it by now.
Fair. Yeah.
It's not easy to kind of create the rigorous support system and with skating at the center. So you need those committed folks. So I would say yes, we'd
Mhm.
love to see this pop up in other places, but it has to start from there because it takes philanthropic dollars and so forth to get more to grow.
Absolutely. Yeah, we know all about that in the entrepreneurial land of venture capital. Cash infusions help, expand missions. So,
Yeah, Fierce in Harlem actually supported Detroit. We didn't,
mm,
you know, I think in retrospect, it's better to have local capital, local philanthropists buy into the mission and support it from the start. But we wanted so badly to do this, we put our own New York
mm,
philanthropic dollars
interesting.
into seeding Detroit, and now they've found their own footing. So.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, it sounds like what you're getting at sort of is buy-in from the local community. Yeah.
Very important. See, when I started, it was a grassroots effort, a community effort. I just happened to be the person walking along saying, "Oh, this is great." And I kind of grew up with the program, and it wasn't my community, but the community embraced this skill set that I could bring. And we worked together hand in hand, the families, the community members worked in the organization, and I think that's why we're successful. It wasn't top down, to be honest. It was really grassroots up.
Hmm.
And so I think that swell of desire has to come from the grassroots.
That's so interesting that you say that. I see that a lot in the Bay Area. I think with nonprofits is that, you can have this idea, but if you don't have kind of the groundswell, it doesn't really go anywhere. Like our story is very much a groundswell appeared and a couple of us jumped in and said, okay, well, we kind of have the skills. Let's all work together and we can point you somewhat in the right direction. But at the end of the day, the community has to want this to happen. So I definitely feel that kind of similar DNA. It's really interesting. Um,
It's just true. It really is. Um, I think that's how I think I don't say should be, but I think there are good ideas that can come in from the outside. In a sense, I had the skill set of figure skating that was from, quote, the outside, but it was the folks on the ground that said, I want opportunities for my daughters to excel. I want to see my daughter have new opportunities. And we're very much want to see what you have to offer. And I think a sense of humility is critical, because I think I've learned a far more than I gave. Just my skill of skating was was nothing compared to understanding youth development and girls development. It was a big education. I had no background in that whatsoever.
That's amazing. And that's so interesting that you say that because it sounds like you kind of started with like a seed set of skills and you almost had to like keep watering and fertilizing and growing and trimming to get into this, place that you are today. So it's really
It,
interesting.
it's it's exactly right. But I'll tell you what we all had in common though was this joy and passion for something. I
Mhm.
mean, when the girls were on the ice, you just saw them light up. And I felt the same way. So we kind of started with that commonality.
Can you talk about sort of like the team building element? Because it's hard to do
Sure.
this, as one person. I imagine, picking the right
Yeah.
folks has got to be tricky as well.
I say to people, we started with a blank sheet of ice.
Mhm.
And I always knew if you could just open the doors to this blank sheet of ice, whoever walked onto that ice would discover who they are just by learning step by step how to skate,
Mhm.
whether I was there or not. So I think there's eventually you needed a group of mentors and educators and coaches to help facilitate the development of the student. But really, the student is developing themselves, and
Mhm.
the falling down and getting back up metaphor is huge. It's not a little thing, and it applies to they do give public speeches. Our kids give the best speeches
Oh,
of
wow.
anybody because we teach them public speaking, and they approach it the same way they approach skating, which is they're going to mess up. They're going to have to learn different techniques. They're going to, and they set a goal and they work toward it. So I think that's really important. I, on the other hand, because I had no experience in nonprofit, did not know what I was getting into, but I had one basic philosophy, and that was if you do good work
Mhm.
and you can share it with others and they can see it, then the support will come. So
Mhm.
you have to believe what you're doing is a net good for the
Mhm.
society and for the kids. And
Mhm.
then you have to prove that you're doing it well.
Yeah.
And then you ask for more support to do it even better. And
Mhm.
I've kind of just really followed that line of thinking all these years. And I've had many great coaches who were better than I ever was. I've had great educators. I have about 5 or 6 alum who come back and work inside the program now.
Wow.
And they're fantastic because the
Yeah.
girls just totally look up to them.
This sort of like
Yeah.
giving back element that, it's not just that the girls are benefiting in the present moment, it's that they move on in their life and then they realize that this is still something that benefited them and they want to give back. I mean, that's an incredible cycle. It really shows in, my mind at least that, you guys are doing net positive, net good. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's really important. And we do look at data. I mean, we've learned over the years that's really important. We collect all their report cards, all their test scores. We, make sure that they're leveling up. We give them the support to do so. We look at their attendance. There's even this thing called Hello Insight, which measures social emotional cues and how they're
Hmm.
developing within their age groups. And of course,
Interesting.
skating tests. They have to pass their USFS skating test. But as far as teamwork, we don't have the funds to give every individual student private skating lessons, which is how
Yeah.
much of skating when I grew up certainly was taught.
Mhm.
So they're really automatically placed in groups to start with.
Hmm.
And we, I think, have kind of made that very cool. Like to learn together in smallish groups has become just the way we learn. And I think that applies when you get out of the ice too. You work with other people. We have 4 competitive synchronized skating teams, and they really work together and they really develop that teamwork because they compete and they take it a little bit more seriously on the ice.
And actually, that brings up a really interesting point. So when I was watching Harlem Ice, there was this moment where I think the coaches were really struggling to communicate with the skaters, and they did this really interesting thing. And I'm curious if this is common or if you can talk about this concept. But the coaches basically said, "Okay, we're aware that we're not communicating well. You girls go figure out what isn't translating, and then come back to us." Is that something
Yeah.
that's part of Harlem Ice, or can you?
I think it's all about personal responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we want them to think for themselves. And if they're resisting something, then go, presumably you all want the same goal, which is to
Yeah.
win, which is to,
Yeah.
win the competition.
Yeah.
So if it's not working one way, we try it another way. I think they can be very innovative
Yeah.
because we're a step outside the traditional skating world. So I think it gives us the freedom to try methods that may not be in vogue right now.
No, that's neat. I loved it. I saw it and I was thinking a lot about kind of like business training that I've had, from like an MBA perspective. I mean, it was
Yeah.
such an interesting transfer, a little bit of responsibility of, okay, we've exhausted our skill set and we only have so much, introspection we can apply. And then they sort of just the fact that they could pass that off was really interesting. And I love what you said about it being kind of novel and unique. So I think that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
There really aren't, as far as I know of, like full-blown not-for-profits that use skating in education and leadership development. And
Yeah.
in some ways, it's a sad commentary because we've been around almost 30 years,
Yeah. Huh.
informally 35 years. So it is probably hard to execute. Um, you want to be put out of business. The goal of my work is to make sure I'm not needed anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to say I probably have 60 plus employees right now,
Wow.
coaches,
Yeah.
counselors, tutors, social workers, core staff who do all the planning. And this is robust for us, but we have to serve, we want to serve over 200 girls,
Yeah.
intentionally and give them something substantive.
Can you talk about kind of that expansion? Like what would it take, do you think, for let's say, as you put it, kind of like figure skating in Harlem to be put out of business to the extent that, the world embraces this? Like, what do you think is the gap today?
I think skating has lost a little bit of its popularity over time.
Hmm.
I
Mhm.
think it goes up and down. It was never a big sport,
Yeah.
but I think there was a time in the 90s or 2000s when it got very popular.
Yeah.
And then there hasn't really been any superstar in the sport that the general public knows about, so it's shrunk back a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, but I love it because it's got an artistic component, it's got an athletic component. It's really hard to do. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
skating, a lot of people just get out there and play around and say, I'm done with this, you know.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
those who stick with it realize it's like math. You build on it. One thing you have to really get proficient in something before you can go on to the next. So I'm sorry if I've lost track of your question there, but I think
Just
tell
as far
me
as far as
again.
like getting kind of figure skating in Harlem, quote unquote, put out of business in the sense of being adopted, I guess, by the world conceptually.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it is an expensive sport, and I think the facilities that where skating is happening are not in urban areas or a lot of places where there are people of color. I
Hmm.
still think even within that, where the way things are, there are methods like figure skating on where you just open the doors up
Hmm.
and we kind of said, not why isn't it happening, but why not?
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think we walked right through and have had a really great result. But it does take people wanting to see that kind of positive uh, sense of opportunity being available to all kinds of kids and not just those who can afford it or one-offs. But there
Yeah.
has to be some intentional programming, I think, to make it stick.
No, makes sense. And you talked a little bit earlier about metrics and that you guys track the girls kind of through through their process and through, I think, college as well. Can you tell us a
Yeah,
little bit about some of those metrics and any that you want
sure.
to share? Yeah.
Well, I think first you want to create a culture of success. We want it to be cool to be good in school. It has to be
Mm-hmm.
cool to be, work out or whatever, and still be a kid. And we want kids to just really reach or go beyond what their personal potential. So generally, I would say more than 80% of our students reach a B average or higher in school,
Hmm.
and about a third of them are straight A students. So
Wow.
for
Yeah.
them, skating's like a bonus ride. Like they're doing well in school, then this is something they really can pursue for their passion.
Hmm.
Um, all of the kids that stay with us through senior year, and they don't all because we started at age 6, um, they're all college bound, and it's been that way for a very long time. So we're
Wow.
really
Yeah.
proud of 100% of our students in matriculating to college.
Hmm.
As I said, completing college is a harder
Yeah.
statistic to
Yeah.
both track and to do, but that is our goal. I have an alum who is currently on our board of directors who started with me when she was really 4. She tried to get on early, 6 years
Yeah.
old, but she was got her degree at Northeastern, worked for Goldman
Hmm.
Sachs for 10 years. She's now a
Wow.
vice president at Royal Bank of Canada
Dang,
and
that's pretty cool.
gives back. Yeah. And I have another student. We do a career week where our students
Hmm.
visit professionals, and 3 of the
Hmm.
5 were alums. So we went to MasterCard
Wow.
because we have an alum who's working in MasterCard. We went to a veterinary office because we have an alum who works in a veterinary office. We went
Hmm.
to Paramount because we had an
Hmm.
alums at Paramount. So
Wow.
the goal
That's
is to,
amazing.
again, like if you can see it, you can be it. And yeah, we track it and we do as many of the best practices as we possibly can.
I think it really speaks, I think, to the quality of the program that you've got folks that are really expanding, into these different industries, that there's sort of breadth there as well as depth and
Yeah.
success in those industries. I mean, I remember reading a statistic a couple of years ago as we were getting our feet off the ground around, basically women in sports have a much higher
Mhm.
potential for success in leadership positions. And I think what you just said really, proves that. You kind of hear a statistic, but when you actually see it happening and hear those stories, I think that's wow.
We won this big business sports business journal award, and I actually am going to be out of the country at the time. But one of my alums
Mhm.
is started me at 6, stayed till 18. She is a Harlemite through and through. She became was recently listed in Forbes 30 under 30 for being
Wow.
an acclaimed photographer. She
Hmm.
has photographed for Rolling Stone, for GQ, for all the top magazines. She photoed the former vice president, and
Wow.
she is an extraordinary talent. And she always comes back to figure skating in Harlem. And
Hmm.
did a TED talk,
Hmm.
TEDx talk about how skating and photography, what the parallels are. So
Huh.
she's really amazing. It's called Black, White Ice, Black Girl.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to check into that.
Black Girl, White Ice on the other.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's amazing. Wow. I know we're kind of running out of time here. So just wanted to get your thoughts on, what lessons do you want to share with our audience? And is there anything else before we wrap up?
One lesson is you don't know where life's going to take you, because I loved skating as a kid, but I went off with a different career and never thought that I would be returning to this,
Mhm.
um, but in a completely different way. And it's very satisfying personally because there's so many aspects to sort of the process of the nonprofit,
Hmm.
but the results and seeing the kids go through their process is an incredible reward. And I
Mhm.
feel so lucky to have been spent my working days, um, witness to their development and helping to facilitate that with a whole lot of other people.
Mhm.
Um, so I would say be open to where life takes you. Skating's a wonderful metaphor. It's about balance, it's about grace, it's about resilience. And I thought about all the ways that that applies to life. So I got bit by the bug early. And I think it probably all of us who skate, it impacts us in our future lives more than we realize. So
That's amazing. I completely relate to that, having started SVISA pretty much right out of college. So I think, if you get that bite, you almost have to, like, to your point, exactly see where it goes. So that is amazing. Um,
you learn a little bit of fearlessness as a skater. I mean, you have to jump up
True.
in the air and turn around in the air without, and fall a lot before you kind of land. So I think it makes us maybe a little bit prone to some risk taking, a lot of discipline.
True.
Um, when I was in college, there were two other competitive skaters at Brown the same year as me, and we became friends. We used to compete against each other, and then we were friends, but we would talk about the good things we got out of skating. And it was clear to me that you didn't have to be a competitive skater to learn some of these lessons that could make a difference. And this
Yeah.
work that we do at Figure Skating in Harlem is very much a product of that. So
I love that so
I,
much.
I wish you the best.
Thank
It sounds
you.
like you're doing, and we always want to go out to Oakland and to other, communities, and there's still plenty of time to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Hopefully, there's an opportunity to partner in the near future. Would absolutely love that. I think our region really could benefit, I think, from a lot of the programming you guys are doing. And I just feel honored that you took the time today, and that back in, I think it was 2016 or 2017, we met at that little salon. And yeah, just really lucky to have you. And thank you so much for your time. Really
Oh, my
appreciate it.
pleasure, Sarah. Thank you. And bring some of that STEM, bring some of that tech to figure skating in Harlem. We're always want to teach our girls some new skills. So.